Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As you may have known, some of you might know it, well, in fact most of you will probably have heard of it, that much of the world's population is shifting towards homosexuality. So this has been in my mind for the past couple of months, but I haven't really played with it so far. Like, yeah, that's interesting, I'll look at it someday. So, recently, in the past few weeks, it's been coming more to the fore, so I was like, okay, let's actually go explore this. So, yesterday evening, I finally decided to go for it. I went into a gay bar. There was, of course, the necessary nerves, that's to be expected. It's the tendency to curl up like a rock in a corner and never get out again. But something inside said, no, we're gonna do this. Forward. So I marched myself into that bar, said hi to people, parked my butt on a bar stool and looked around for a bit. What kind of people do come here? So, some older people, alright. Let's strike up a conversation with that guy. So, I talked to some people, and we switched swords. So, what do you do for a living? What do you do in life? And I talked about Elfpath as well, because that's a major part of my life at this point. What I did was I pitched it in terms like, so it's life counseling and spirituality and a blend of it. Talk like, alright, find out who you really are inside, go live that underneath all the social rules and bullshit and anxieties. So you don't have to mention any energy stuff or we recall past lives or work with animal totems, because most people will just be weirded out by that. So, as you can see, you can talk about the meta in a way that makes sense to people. And they were like, oh, that's interesting, that's cool. And after a while I actually gathered up my courage and went to be loud and obnoxious, and people actually liked that. Like, oh, hey, you look like a bit like that guy from that ship, Captain Jack, Sparrow? Yeah, that's the one. I was like, yeah, I can see that. And what I also found was that with my current look, people were actually starting to hitting on me. Two guys were actually trying to get in my pants as far as I was aware. Well, that's interesting, but let's wait with that for a while, shall we? So, and in fact they thought I was so amazing, they wanted to take me home and have more drinks there. So we did, and we had a good time, even though I was starting to get tired a bit. And in the process I scanned and, okay, what do you need? So I tried telling people what they needed, like, hey, you've had enough to drink for tonight. He didn't like it, he pulled his intimidator. I was like, I know what you're pulling, that's intimidator. Every intro student knows that. I'm not impressed. So I said, yeah, that's cute, yeah, just smile and nod and keep talking and giving him what he needs. And after that, after a tiring evening, I went home. And then realized, yeah, that was pretty cool actually. And with that, I would like to give the microphone to the big.
Hi folks. Originally, I'd intended to give our friend Gimli 3 minutes, but the way he's going I may have to give him the whole hour, and I'll just come in with closing arguments. He does seem to like to talk. And since he introduced it, I will do something I have been intentionally avoiding for months. And that's to talk about sex, sexuality, and relationships. Now, if anyone doesn't know what Gimli was talking about, the idea that the world has traditionally been 5 to 10% gay and about 90% straight, and it's reversing to the point where it's going to be 5 to 10% straight people, breeders, and 90% gay. This is one of my prophecies, and so I don't know that if you look around you'll find any books written about it. You won't find it published anyplace. But I feel very strongly about it, and I have for years now. And generally when I feel this strongly about something, I see it happen. So for the moment I'm taking it as true. Gimli speaks of it as if it were absolutely true. He could be right. For me it's true. And this is going to change some things in our lives. I don't care who you are, or where you were raised, what your family was like. You have some prejudices against homosexuality. I don't think it's possible to not have them in this society. I spent about 3 years, more than a decade ago, only dating men. And what I found is that amongst gay men, there is as much prejudice against gay men as in the straight community. Many of them had so much self-loathing, they had to get drunk or be on drugs in order to make out with someone or to get physical with someone. If people who spent the last 10, 20, 30 years of their life living a gay lifestyle still have issues, anxiety, judgment, bitterness about being gay, the odds are that anyone who doesn't have that experience also has it. The comments we use in high school or grade school to say that something is stupid or should be dismissed as irrelevant. Oh, that's so gay. We toss these comments out without paying attention to them. When we're angry at someone, we may call them a homosexual. I have heard boys say to other boys, "You're such a fag." And it was clearly an unkind thing to say. It wasn't a compliment. And I have heard little girls making fun of one another, saying, "You're a dyke, nobody likes you." And anything you're raised with from the time you're kids is part of you. It lives in the guts. It's something you have to deal with. So I don't care who you are. If you haven't even got your white belt yet, or if you're Roja running the program, you look deep enough inside, you're going to find that you've acquired in your lifetime some bias against homosexuality. Now, in the next 30 to 50 years, that's going to change a lot, if I'm correct. When 90% of the population is doing something, it's tough to consider them anything other than normal. It's going to be something we just take as part of life and accept without judgment or bitterness. The hate groups, including, say, the religious folks, holding up signs saying, "God hates fags, homosexuals are going to hell." These kind of hate groups are going to have to retire when 90% of their membership is also finding themselves attracted to their same gender. And this is a battle or a struggle that society will have to face. And at the moment, it's not our problem. Our problem right now, your problem, is to find this battle inside. Find the part of you that jumps up and says, "I'm going to kill somebody, I hate you," when you think of homosexuality or dating someone of your same gender. You need to find that part. You need to grab it by the scruff of the neck like a kitten and sit it down and talk to it. You need to teach it that it's not okay to hate anybody because of the color of their skin, because of the way they look, because of who they fall in love with, because of what language they speak. You need to find this part of yourself and begin talking to it. And while you can do this tonight, and I encourage each of you, if you're curious about this, to see if you can find a place in you that rebels against the idea of being homosexual. Find that place and see if it sits somewhere. See if you can find that spot inside, for those of you who have the tools, and talk to it. See what it has to say. Begin teaching it as you would a child. Teaching it to be more accepting of people, of their differences, of their limits, of what interests them and what doesn't. And for those who don't have those tools, a much simpler approach is this. Think about, imagine being gay, and see what emotions come up. And when they come up, just feel them. Maybe the emotions are dismissive. Oh, that'll never happen. Well, that is in fact an emotion. Feel it. Maybe it's disgust, maybe it's anger, maybe it's fear, anxiety. What will my parents think? Oh my God, will I go to hell? Feel those things. You don't have to think about them. You don't have to sort them out. You don't have to understand them. They're emotional responses stored in your guts, just like any other gut muck. Put your feet on the floor, get in your guts, breathe deep and clear, and just feel. And if you get to the point where it stabilizes and you don't feel all the anxiety or fear or frustration or whatever, then imagine a little more. Imagine actually dating someone. Imagine holding hands. Imagine walking with them. Imagine telling your parents. Imagine telling your friends. And just see the emotions. Feel them as they come up. And really, perhaps a good metaphor here is to get into bed with those emotions. Just grab them and snuggle them. Feel them. Just really feel them. And as you feel them, breathe and ground and center, and they'll begin to fade. This is a process, like many, which if you start, will take you a while to get through. Even if somehow tomorrow you magically are totally okay with the idea of changing your sexuality, you may find that next week or next month an angry piece or an afraid piece comes up. That's okay. You'll deal with it when it does. Just begin the process of considering the possibility. Like any prophet, I can be wrong. Perhaps I've misread the signs. Perhaps I've misread the timeline. Maybe it's only going to be 60% of people and not 92 point something. Maybe you're going to be one of that percent who doesn't have to change. Still, everyone around you is going to change. If I'm right, beginning to find this in yourself, the rebellion, the anger, the loathing, the disgust, the fear, find it in yourself and let it go. It will be helpful to you. It will be helpful to you to get free of this. Even if you're one of the 5 to 7% who aren't going to change your sexual preference, it will still be useful to get rid of the anger, the fear, the loathing, the judgment, all the religious nonsense. I can't speak to every religion out there because I haven't studied all of them. I've studied several. At one point, I went through the entire Christian Bible, Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, a big book, and found every reference to sex, to sexuality, to men being with men and women being with women. And there's nowhere in the Bible, in the Christian text, nowhere does it say that homosexuality is wrong. Nowhere. Now, there's a place in the New Testament where it says you shouldn't be going to temple prostitutes, and the temple prostitutes at the time were often homosexual relationships. It says in the Old Testament that if a man lies with a man or a woman with a woman, that it's an abomination. Which sounds pretty clear. This is bad, right? But if you read 2 or 3 verses before, it says that storing milk and meat together is an abomination. It says a couple verses later that wearing a cloth made of 2 different fibers is an abomination. This is just a translation of the word that means not kosher. If anybody tells you that the Bible says that homosexuality is an abomination, then they better not be wearing a poly-cotton blend. They better not have both milk and meat in the fridge. They better not be eating pig or shellfish or anything with cloven hoods that doesn't chew the cud. These things are all not kosher. And so, if you're a kosher Orthodox Jew, you may actually decide that homosexuality isn't kosher because the old rules say so. That's fine. But if you don't wear a little black hat and have the side curls, you have no right to claim that the Bible speaks against homosexuality. I have gone through every verse I could find and read it in context, and I have found nothing in there. This is simply hate speech. The Ku Klux Klan, in their rhetoric against those of African descent, will quote the Bible. Adolf Hitler in his great purge, or effort at a purge, the cruelty that he did, he was supported by the Roman Catholic Church. There are pictures of him sitting and having dinner with cardinals and being supported, being encouraged by the church. What he did in the name of religion. When the settlers to the United States came in and killed the vast majority of the Native Americans, often in really cruel ways, they did it in the name of religion. These are heathen savages. They have no right to exist. They don't know God. Religion was used as a justification for cruelty, time and time again. If you ever want to read something really horrible, look up a book called the Malleus Maleficarum. The Hammer or of something. It's basically the instruction manual for the Roman Catholic Inquisition. Over 300 years, more than 1 million women were kidnapped and tortured to death. And the Malleus Maleficarum tells you step by step how to do it. Why? Because you're saving their souls. This was another example of religion being used to justify a hate group. And religion has been used to justify the hatred of homosexuality. But it has no more basis than being quoted by the Ku Klux Klan or Adolf Hitler or the idiots who ran the Inquisition. When someone gives you that, just dismiss it. There is no grounding, no basis. It's just hate speech. So that said, I'd like to take a moment and remind you of one of the basic ideas of Elfpath. And that is, don't believe anything I tell you. Don't believe anything your teachers tell you. If this were a cult, I'd be making lists of rules and telling you you had to believe them and you have to follow them. We don't want that. The Elfpath's entire purpose is to teach people to think for themselves, to find their own answers. And so the very first skill you're taught is how to scan. And the longer you're in this, the more you're taught how to scan and decide for yourself. And so I encourage you very strongly, with everything I'm telling you, the idea that the gender preference of the world is changing dramatically, scan that. The idea that what these hate groups in the name of religion are spouting about homosexuality is just that, hate speech, scan it. Don't take my word for it. Sit down with it and scan it. Actually read the first 3 or 4 books of the Old Testament. See how many things are called an abomination. Do the research for yourself and scan it for yourself. Now, that said, let's take the serious out of it. One of the biggest difficulties in dating, in heterosexual dating, is understanding your partner. I have never met a man who claims to understand women. Never. Everyone I've ever met said you can't figure them out. They're completely crazy. You just accept it and don't argue. And I've met very, very few women who claim to understand men, which is strange because men are pretty simple when it comes to relationships. There's this difference in the way that men's minds and women's minds work. There's a difference in the way their emotions work. There's a difference in the way their sexuality works. And it makes for a constant conflict. It's as if you say, "Do you want chicken for dinner?" And they hear, "I'm really dissatisfied in you." Where did that come from? How did it happen? And it goes both ways. If you have ever been in a relationship that lasted more than about 3 months, you're familiar with this. You say something, they'll hear something totally different. It's because men and women think different. They communicate different. I don't care what anybody tells you. There's a lot to be said in this idea that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. They're just different critters. Anybody who's been in a long-term relationship has run across this. And this isn't going to be a problem anymore. If you're a man dating a man, you know what he wants. You know what he needs. When he says, "I'm tired, I want to watch television," you know he means he's tired and he wants to watch television. He's not saying he's dissatisfied with your performance. Or if you're a woman dating a woman and she tells you a problem, you're going to say, "Oh, that's terrible," and you're going to listen. You're not going to jump in and try and fix it. You're going to know much more quickly what your partner needs. This will be a really huge advantage. There's going to be a lot less struggle, a lot less confusion. You're going to know what it takes to make someone happy. You're going to know what they want. You're going to know what they expect. Because they're going to be wired a lot like you. And so I have a feeling this will be a good news. A lot of what we've seen in the past 2, 3, 4,000 years in this world about relationships has been violent. There's been a lot of violence, a lot of abuse in relationships. I have a feeling most of that will go away. That this sort of ingrained response that's passed on subconsciously from mother to son and father to daughter, this struggle, is going to evaporate. This is going to get easier, gentler, more fun. And I approve of easier, gentler, and more fun. So this is actually a thing to look forward to. In the time that I dated men, I found them much easier to handle and much easier to get along with. My own experience says that it's a lot less trouble. So I know that some of you are going to say, "Ooh, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if my folks will accept. I don't know." I want you to start considering it. Just consider it. For those of you who are daring enough, you might start looking at sexual pictures or watch a video and see how you respond. Just look around. Just play with it. I'm walking very carefully amongst the things that I could say, because not everything is appropriate for people at every level. So I'm trying to express ideas that are very general, rather than hit any sensitive spots. We pattern on our parents early on. Most of you, anyone past Yellow Belt, will know that the Elfpath works with this. That the men and the fan nodes are patterned on our primary caregivers. And so this is a piece that's going to provoke some confusion when it comes up. If your folks were heterosexual and you start moving more towards a same-sex attitude, which parent are you going to pattern on? How do you copy the sexuality? It's going to be interesting. It's going to create some whole new challenges and some whole new exciting areas for growth. And so I cannot easily predict what's going to happen. I can say that it's going to be big. There is no precedent in nature, none that I know of. There's no precedent in culture for the vast majority of the population suddenly changing their gender preference. And so we're writing the book on it here. Not we in this room, we, this world, are writing the book on this. We're going to decide how it happens. Not that many years ago, I got in the Silicon Valley, where all the computers come from, just before the explosion of the internet. And I made a lot of money in a very short time, just a few years, because I managed to catch that wave just as it was cresting. This is an area, if I'm right, it's going to affect every single person. It's going to affect things you may not think of, like men's and women's restrooms. What are we going to do? I mean, normally they're separated because of, the sexual interaction between the people, but if all the women are hitting each other and all the men are hitting on each other, how are they going to handle it? How are schools going to handle this? Gyms and showers. There are gymnasiums where you can go to now as an adult that say only women can go to, so men aren't there to hit on them. How is that going to happen? Marriages. There are a huge number of married people who are homosexual. I see them walking down the street every day. At least one, sometimes both partners, are looking at other members of their same gender, but they're clearly married and they have kids. What's going to happen? Is daddy going to bring a friend and mommy going to bring a friend and have 4 parents in the family? Are they going to separate? If so, who gets the kids? How does that work? There's a lot of confusion that's going to come out of this. So anytime there's lots of confusion, a big change sweeping in, this is a time to get involved. If you want to be a counselor, if you want to write books, if you want to teach people how to handle this, if you want to start marketing products or selling something specifically to people making this transition, you can make a fortune. You can be a multimillionaire in 10 years' time by jumping on this one. This is the start of a wave, so what I'm trying to tell you is it doesn't have to be totally scary. Right? It can make your life easier, it can make your relationships easier, take a lot of stress out. And socially, it can be really interesting, simply because we have no idea where it's going, and we get to chart the path. You may decide to start your own talk show about the great sex shift. You may be as popular as Oprah 10 years from now. Assume everybody knows who Oprah is. You may want to get into law and specialize in all the legal issues going with this. There are all kinds of stuff going on. There's all kinds of possibilities to explore and grow and change. And if you get involved in it now, assuming I'm correct, if you get involved in it now, you're going to be one of the pioneers. Not that many years ago, a geeky little kid that nobody liked, named Bill Gates, was working in his garage, soldering parts together and writing a basic operating system called Windows. Well, actually it was DOS at the time, but Windows came out of it. And now just about everybody in the world who has a computer uses Bill Gates' operating system, because he got in on the ground floor and got it started. In a time of such great change, you have the chance. If you can find an idea, something that interests you, you have the chance to get in and get started in something that 10, 20 years from now, everyone on the planet could be doing. There's opportunities here. I wrote a short piece once, and I won't cover it here. I'll just reference Roja. And it was called something like Truths About Relationships. And it's a list of 40 or 50 things that everybody knows are true about relationships. And if you read them, you'll say, yeah, that makes sense. That's reasonable. And it's my conclusion, based on scanning these things at a pretty deep level, that every single one of them is wrong. So if you're interested, I'd say, talk to her, see if you can find a copy of that, and as long as you're considering rewriting your entire gender preference, it may be a good time to rewrite your ideas of relationships. A chance to redesign how you think and feel about them. And then when you get in one, maybe it'll be your first one, maybe it'll be your first one with someone of the same gender, you can approach it with a whole new set of attitudes and expectations. You can approach it as an adult, rather than an emotional 8-year-old being overwhelmed and disturbed and frightened by it. And you may find that it's actually pretty amazing. Now, I'm talking generally about relationships and sexuality. I'm avoiding talking about the central concept here. There are two factors. Now, I've counseled thousands of people, most of them about relationships, in the past 30 years. And in all that, I've consistently found only two factors that define what a relationship is. The first one of those is ownership. As in, you're my spouse, you can't sleep with that other person. You're my partner, you have to be involved. You have to care about me because you're my husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, significant other. Ownership seems to be one of the biggest factors. And the second one is sex. And I've avoided talking about this because it's such a big, scary word to so many people. Some of you have avoided having sex your entire life because it's just too scary. You just don't want to go there. Some of you have played with it and found it uninteresting. Some of you have played with it and been scared by your own responses. Maybe I'll hurt someone. Maybe there's something wrong with me. There's just so much chaos to do with the idea of sex that I have avoided mentioning it. But since Gimli starts us out in this direction, and since I've been thinking about discussing it for months, I'll jump into it a little bit. And to start it off, in a somewhat iconoclast approach, making hamburgers out of holy cows here. Sex is no more nor less significant than a handshake. Now, people will say, oh, if you have sex with someone, you have to totally love them and be committed to them, and it makes a connection between you, and all kinds of emotional baggage. You have to buy them Valentine cards, and you have to know their favorite color, and there's a lot of emotional and social baggage tied to sex. There is. I acknowledge it. I admit it. I've counseled it for 30 years. The good, the bad, and the horrifically ugly. But when you boil it down to its fundamental, when you scan it at a deep enough level, I imagine you will find the same thing. That fundamentally sex is no different than a handshake. You're putting one part of your body into someone else's body and you're moving it around. That's all. And it can be used as a way to say, hey, how you doing? I haven't seen you in a while. Let's, have some fun. It can be used to intimidate, to abuse, to hurt. It can be used as violence. It can be casual. It can be deeply intimate and endearing. It can be, you ever watch a movie where somebody does one of these handshakes where they do this and this and this and it can be silly. Good sex is often silly. When you quit taking it serious, it can actually be a lot of fun. But in essence, it is no different than a handshake. It is a way to physically touch another person and share a part of yourself. That's it. But so is a handshake. So is a hug. So is a kiss. The only fundamental difference with sexuality is that you have to be at least partially naked, and people are really creeped out by nudity. There are a lot of places you can send to prison for the rest of your life or be labeled a sex fiend for the rest of your life for being naked. People are really uptight about sexuality. Sex, it's nothing more than a nude handshake. Now, maybe that scares somebody, maybe that offends somebody, maybe that frightens you a bit, but if you can just think of it that way, sex itself is just a way to touch someone. And if you despise your partner, it can be a way to tear them down, but so can words. So can a careless touch. If you love them, it can be a way to build them up and make them like themselves better, but so can a touch. A hug, a kiss on the cheek, a carefully spoken word. Sex does not have inherent value. It is a carrier of value. In essence, it's a bit like a telephone line. Well, from back in the old days when telephones actually had wires. It's the carrier signal. And you can have your phone plugged in, have it turned on, maybe pick up the phone and hear the dial tone. And it's a perfectly functional carrier tone, but it's not saying anything to you. When somebody picks up that phone and they call you and say, "I hate you, I never want to see you again," it can really hurt. Or they call and say, "I'm so grateful you're in my life, you're so amazing," it can make you feel really wonderful. It's not the carrier that makes a difference. It's what's expressed through it. And this is true of sex. When we can take the scary and the intimidating and the overwhelming out of sex and make it just another way to communicate, then we can communicate what we want. We communicate with integrity, with passion, with humor, with purpose. Whatever factors, ideas, things we want to communicate, we can communicate them. Or we can communicate them with a handshake, or a hug, or a kiss on the cheek. So, this is my effort at sexual blasphemy. Sex isn't special. It's just like a handshake. Now, I'm not saying it isn't sacred. A handshake is sacred if it's done properly. Words can be sacred if they're done properly. But once again, sacred is what's carried on that carrier signal. Sacred, special, meaningful, amazing, important. These are the things that come from you, not from the way that you choose to communicate. Whether it's a wink or a handshake or a nod or a quickie in the loo, it doesn't matter. Those are just the carrier signals for who you are. And who you are is what makes it sacred and special. If we could recognize that, if we could begin to understand that, we wouldn't have to be so terrified about sexuality. This is just a way to express who I am. Okay, well, let me learn to like who I am, and then I'll have no trouble expressing it. And if your lover doesn't approve, it's not the sex they're disapproving of, it's you. They don't like who you are. Find a different lover. If the person you're with really loves you, it doesn't matter what technique you use or how much you weigh or what you look like naked, or none of this stuff matters. What matters is the person you love. So, as an exercise, another exercise here, try considering sex this way. And I know from everyone I've ever talked to that this is not obvious, it's not clear, it's not easy to understand. So I'm not telling you believe me, I'm telling you try it. Try taking the value out of sex itself and putting the value back in you where it belongs. And seeing sex, or the idea of sex, as just a carrier signal for your value. And when you can do that, say the person that you're involved with, married to, committed to, has sex with someone else. It's no longer going to be the cause for this huge drama. Oh my God, my life is over. My partner cheated. How could they do that to me? It's just going to be, well, they shook hands with someone else. And if they've done anything wrong there, it would be that they've promised to only be involved with you, and they broke that promise. Well, they may have promised to meet you for dinner last week and didn't make it. They got held late at work or something. We break our promises to our partners sometimes. And your partner sleeping with someone else, having sex with someone else, is no more significant than standing you up for dinner or forgetting your anniversary or not recording a program on television they said they would for you. It's simply a broken promise. Not a thing to be upset, no cause for drama. Get over it. And you can't do that until you take all the baggage out of sex. It doesn't belong there. Sex doesn't have value, you have value. And when you can begin to understand that, the value is yours. It's not in the act, it's not in the sound, it's not in the word, it's in you. When you can begin to just consider that idea, you'll find a lot of this extra outside drama starts to evaporate. So, once again, I don't say believe it. I challenge you, each of you, to start considering this crazy, insane idea that sex isn't special. It's just a slightly messier handshake. And if you've done enough of it, you know the messy part can be fun. Sex isn't supposed to be neat and proper. It's about getting a little sweaty and having fun and playing with it. It's a good thing. So, I have stepped on the idea, the Christian and Muslim and others' idea, that homosexuality is evil and you're going to hell. That's bullshit. You're not. That's based on misreading of very old books, kosher laws and such. I have stepped on the idea that relationships have to be shaped as we've traditionally done them. I encourage people to look at the idea that you might actually be happier with someone of your own gender and not someone of the other gender. And I have taken a good healthy swing at the sacred cow, the holy cow that is sex. And so I've pushed a lot of big scary buttons in the last 40 minutes, 30 minutes. And even if you're only half paying attention, I'm not talking about little things. I'm not talking about ideas like I have in the past. Well, try and practice gratitude. I'm poking at things that are wired so deep in your guts that in many ways your identity is tied to them, your world is built on them. And I'm doing my best to chop some of them down. And so if you consider these ideas, if you work with them, I expect you to find anger. Because anytime something really shakes your world, it provokes fear. And fear almost always leads to anger. So I expect anger. I expect rebellion. I expect many people will say, oh, that's complete nonsense. He's so totally wrong. He doesn't know what he's talking about. That's okay. Allow those feelings. They're just feelings. Like any other. Feel them and breathe. And when you've had enough, let them go. But consider the ideas. Hold them in your guts. If you can, hold them in your heart and just consider them, feel them, scan them, work with them. Think of it like, a stray animal. Very, very skittish. You've got to touch it very gently and speak very softly. When you work with these ideas, think of it a bit like that. You don't run in and grab a stray cat. You get scratched up. Or grab a stray dog. You don't reach out and grab a squirrel. It's just not a good choice. But if you speak to them softly and maybe put a little peanut butter on a cracker, you can eventually get that squirrel to come up and take it out of your hand and sit right next to you and make that little noise that they do. You just have to do it gently, patiently. And this is the attitude I encourage every one of you to have as you begin to look at these ideas of sexuality. We can all be wrong, including me. Maybe this will never happen. But I'll tell you that I'm pretty good at scanning. And I have done deeper than a level 10 scan, which I don't think anybody else here knows how to do yet. And I find that this is true. The deepest scan I know how to make, I find that this is true. So I take it very seriously. And so I encourage you all to take it very seriously. Not to believe it, but to take it seriously and start looking inside. Gently holding these ideas, playing with them, exploring them. Watch your dreams when you do. Your subconscious doesn't speak to you directly, not for most of us, but it often shouts very clearly in your dreams. Wake up every day and just write down a few notes on what you were dreaming about. And then once in a while go back and look and see if, your subconscious is trying to tell you something. It's not always so obvious as, finding yourself in an orgy with a big pile of sweaty bodies. It's sometimes a little more subtle. But watch your dreams. And there's not much I can say beyond that, except that I expect these changes. And I encourage you to at least keep an eye open and begin to find inside yourself the parts of you that rebel, that panic, that fear, that get angry. And begin to look at them and begin to tame them and get to know them a little better. Now, that said, I have done more than enough shaking up of worlds. So, why don't you all toss out a few questions that I'm sure many people are thinking. Anything.
I was wondering, you said female-female relationship understand each other better as males. How does it work if you have very male-ish female?
Alright, so your question is, I said that men generally understand men better and women generally understand women better, and you're saying, what if it's a very masculine woman? I agree that our gender is not specifically tied to our genitals. We all have male and female energy, and some have a lot more of one than another. However, consider that every woman you date, pretty much without exception, is going to have a monthly cycle. They're going to know what PMS is. They're going to know what it is to suddenly be crying at a stupid commercial or being angry and want to shout at people for no reason. They're going to know the emotional and physical chaos that comes up in this cycle. Men don't get that. They're going to understand how sensitive some parts of your body can be, and how sometimes it's good to be a little rough, but sometimes you want to touch things a little more gently. Men have different parts. They're not going to understand that. If you watch your average sexual movie, porn, even R-rated movies, adult movies, just regular grown-up movies, you find that often men show a real lack of understanding of how a woman's body works. And so yeah, you're going to find that there are differences with a woman who's a lot more masculine or a man who's a lot more feminine, but the basic chemistry, the physicality of it is going to be there. And so you're going to find that it's easier. Okay? Alright. Gimli, Martin.
Someone would like to know if genders start dating each other, would it not be more difficult to understand different genders? For men to understand women if they deal so much with.
This is a useful question. Bravo to whoever said this. The question is this. Men and women have trouble understanding each other. But see, if men start dating men and women start dating women, isn't this gap between them going to get huge? Let me ask you, who understands women better, a gay man or a straight man? Anybody?
Gay men.
It's pretty universal. gay men understand women better. Why? Well, when I learned to drive, I don't know if everyone here knows what a four-way stop is, but where two roads cross and there are stop signs everywhere. If you stop at the same time as someone else, you have to decide who goes first. And I was taught very early on what was called the beater rule. A beater is a very old beat-up car. The guy with the most beat-up car has the right-of-way. Why? Because he doesn't mind crashing it and you do. So, if you have a nice car, you pull up an intersection, he's got a beat-up car, let him go. You've got a lot more to lose than he does. Does that make sense? This idea? It's the same. In a relationship, a man is desperately trying, usually in a relationship, a man is desperately trying to get laid. Most everyone who's had a relationship, watched movies, and so on, knows that the first thing a woman will do when she's unhappy is withhold sex. Men don't withhold sex as punishment, generally. This is very, very common among women. I saw a television show a couple days ago where a woman was talking to a little girl about trouble with her boyfriend, and she said, well, the first thing I do is withhold sex, but you're only 12, so... It's such a common thing that it shows up in all of our movies and television, and probably most of you have experienced it. And so, if you have this, a man's afraid of this loss, or on the other side of it, a man may withhold attention, right? When he's unhappy, he'll go lock himself in the garage and work on his car and not talk to you for days. He won't return your calls. Men go into what Dr. Gray calls the cave and hide. They withhold all attention when they're grumpy, when they're not getting what they want. And so often a woman will go out of her way to try and give a man what he wants so he can get attention. A man may go out of his way to give a woman attention so he gets sex. Now, admittedly, I'm generalizing. I'm playing a little fast and loose, but the basic idea is the same. There is a consequence. If you ask a gay man, do these jeans make my ass look fat? He's going to look at it and give you an honest answer. You ask your partner, do these jeans make my ass look fat? He's going to be thinking, what do I have to say to get laid tonight? He's not going to be honest with you because there's a consequence. She's not going to be honest with you because there's a consequence. What we have here is effectively the same as the beater rule. If you have a high value placed on a thing, your car's worth more than theirs, you're going to let them go. You're going to forget about the rules. You're going to forget about doing it right. Let them have whatever they want because I don't want to lose. And this happens in relationships. If you've got a lot to lose, you're going to withhold honesty. You're going to withhold communication. You're going to withhold anything that might damage what you have to lose. And see, when you no longer have the sexual pressure between men and women, they can start being honest with each other. They can say, I really don't like it when you do that. That cologne smells terrible. That hairdo looks ugly. They can start being honest. And at first, it's going to create some friction because, we've all tiptoed around. Men being very careful what they say about women, women being careful of the fragile male ego. We've all tiptoed around these things, and we won't have to. Because we don't have anything to lose anymore. We can start treating people as people rather than as a relationship I have to maintain. And so what's likely to happen is this huge gap between the genders is going to start evaporating. And I think in addition you're going to find that an increasing number of men have a very strong feminine side, and as you suggested, an increasing number of women will have a strong masculine side. That right now, well, for the last 1,000 years there's been a social polarization. Women have to dress a certain way and perform certain roles. Men have to dress a certain way and perform certain roles. And society has pushed them apart. But increasingly, androgyny is becoming the norm. That there's this increasing overlap. And in that overlap, we're going to find that there's much more communication, there's much more understanding. And so this gap between men and women should actually get a lot smaller. Does it make sense? Alright, next question.
Someone is saying that sex has a big component of instinct too, where the handshake doesn't, and how the instinctual part of sex makes it more difficult.
Oh, it's a naive question. Alright, the question is this. Sex has a big part of instinct in it, and handshakes don't. What's the primary purpose of a handshake? To say hi, to make contact. Those are good ideas. But no, the primary purpose of a handshake is the pack dynamic. Figuring out where you fit in the pack, the social hierarchy, dominance, all of the biologically ingrained social aspects of our lives, all of these get included in the handshake. In whether you make eye contact, how far apart you stay, the tension in your shoulders, whether you're looking down or up, whether you're speaking loud or speaking softly. All of these things get integrated into that first contact, that handshake. And these things are so wired into you, so deep in your guts, they're totally instinct. Most of you won't even realize, unless I've talked to you about it, how big a part in your life social dominance plays, the pack instinct, deciding who's the bigger dog. A handshake is intensely, deeply involved. A handshake is deeply involved with this whole instinct process of defining your role in the pack. It's in those first moments of meeting and greeting that you go through all this social dominance instinct stuff. And so handshakes are no less instinctual than sex. In fact, they might have more of the instinct in them. The only real difference, the only thing that would lead one to say that sex is more instinctual, is that anybody who's had sex will tell you, the more involved you get, the more physically excited you get, the closer you get to orgasm, the more your brain shuts off. You become very visceral and much less intellectual. And so this may lead someone to think that sex is totally instinctual. The truth is, unless you have a really good partner, that instinctual component is the last 5 minutes of sex. And if any of you ever tried to go out and pick up a stranger, you may find that you buy them drinks all night, talk to them all night, and maybe get a phone number. Then you take them out on a few dates, and at some point you get your first kiss, and there can be weeks and weeks of social interaction that predate, that precede that 5 minutes when the instincts take over. Now, again, if you have a really good partner, that can be a lot longer than 5 minutes, but that's more rare than you'd think. So the vast majority of sexuality, not just intercourse, but sexuality, the whole building to, do we do this, how do we do this, when do we do this, all of that is social, is intellectual, is emotional. It is not instinctual. If it were instinctual, relationships would be a lot easier. One more question. Come on, somebody ask me one of the interesting ones. Gimli, you were out last night. Ask me an interesting one. Something from what you did. Catherine, ask me one. Yeah, I know this scary stuff. It's okay. Martin, I know you're bubbling with questions, but I know what she'll tell you, so. Come, spit something out.
I have a question regarding dominance.
Perhaps I shouldn't say phrases like come when I'm talking about sex. You say, here, spit it out. Alright. Ask your question. How's that?
Yes. When someone is being more dominant than you and you're not comfortable with that, what would be a healthy way of dealing with that other than just, running away and shutting off contact?
Alright. the question is, if someone's being more dominant and trying to push you around, and your first instinct is to just run away and hide, or duck and cover, what's a better way to handle it? And that's not really the question I was expecting, but it's okay. I'll give it a shot. The truth is that all of human relationships are governed by social dominance because humans are evolved as pack creatures. We all decide who's the biggest dog, and we look to them, and we follow them. Everything. So, Gimli's question has a lot of relevance. If you go in for a job interview, if you meet someone on a first date, if you're hanging out with a group of friends, if you're in junior high school, it doesn't matter. Your interactions are all about deciding who's the alpha dog and then keeping them happy. This affects all of us. So instead of answering your question directly, let me answer it indirectly but more effectively. Some of you who've been here longer know how to scan the emotional age of a person. Right? So imagine that I have a 15-year-old and an 8-year-old walking down the street. Maybe a babysitter and the person they're babysitting. The 8-year-old says, let's run out in traffic, let's cross the street now. And the 15-year-old says, nope, we'll have to wait for that signal. Generally speaking, when there's a 15-year-old and an 8-year-old, who should be making the decisions? The older person. Because they know more, they understand more, they're more stable, they're more confident, they have more experience. And so what I'm going to suggest to you is, instead of trying to handle the dominance thing, start paying attention to the emotional age of a person. Generally, by the time a person starts trying to be pushy and dominant and put you in your place, they've regressed in emotional age. They're 5 years old. And so my response is, start watching the emotional age. And when someone comes up to you and says, rah, 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 and their shoulders are up and their chin's forward and their chest is sticking out, and all the signs of dominance, the hair in the back of their neck standing up, ignore those signals. Your biology is going, oh my God, it's a fight, what do I do? Ignore those. Acknowledge them, feel them, breathe, let them go, right? But instead of letting those rule the day, go a little higher and scan. What's their emotional age? And if you do this and you scan, oh, this person is, 4 or 5, then you say, all right, do I want to let a 4-year-old push me around? Is that really the smart move? Right now, I'm a little nervous, so maybe I'm 16, but they're 4. Do I want to let them make the decisions? No, that's not reasonable. And once you've accepted that, they're just a kid. Once you've actually scanned it and found it true, then the next step is to scan, well, what do they need? And you might sense, oh, they're insecure, they're nervous, they're afraid, they want reassurance, something. It doesn't matter what you scan. You respond to that and not to their social dominance. Not, all right, I'm big, no, I'm bigger, no, I'm bigger, and like two cats yowling at each other. Forget that. Look at their emotional age and respond to that. And then give them what they need. And what you'll find is, very often, somebody's going, rah, 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 rah. You just give them a few words and suddenly they melt. It all changes. And then there's no question that you're dominant, but you're not worried about it anymore. You know that you're the adult and they're the kid, and you give them what they need. I think I was 8 or 9, 10 years old at one point, out in a public place, and this huge fella in a leather jacket and, big beard and a motorcycle helmet came up on this big Harley and blustering into the place. And I looked at him. Even at that age, I could tell that he was really deeply sad. And so I went over and sat down and talked to him. My mother was there. She's trying to drag me away. You can't talk to dangerous people. Right? She saw social dominance. He's big, he's scary, he's dangerous. I looked at him and saw his emotional age and his feelings. He's really sad. And so I went over to him and said, you're really sad. Why? And it turned out that this great big burly scary fella had just been dumped by the woman he loved. He was just crazy about it, wanted to spend his life with her, and she dumped him, and he had no idea why. And he was distraught. He ended up crying, and he just, Mac Big Mac or whatever he was eating there. And I just listened for a while and told him it'd be okay. When I left, he felt better. I was just a kid. I didn't know about relationships. I didn't know about social dominance. But I looked and I saw, here's someone who is very emotionally young. What does he need? And I gave that to him. And there was no question that I'm this little scrawny kid with, big blonde afro at the time, and he's this big scary fella, and I was the alpha. I was the one in charge. I didn't even know what that meant at the time, but I was, because I did what I just told you. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Roha, you seem like you have one more question you really want to ask one of your kids. Was there one?
Someone was asking.
Yeah, that doesn't matter. Alright, well, I'll finish up with this. Don't run out and jump in bed with the first man or woman or whatever your gender is. Don't. It's going to be a bad experience. Well, it's probably going to be a bad experience. Generally, when you jump in with the first person you find, it's not quality. Instead, start looking at these ideas in yourself. Start maybe gently fantasizing, just holding hands or kissing, little things. Just start with these things and play with them gently, like taming a wild animal. Speak to them gently. If you read a book called The Little Prince, Jean Saint-Exupéry, there's a place in there where the fox teaches him how to tame a wild animal. This is how you tame a fox. Use that. Use that gently moving towards and getting closer, and just kind of sit the idea and look at it, and then later move a little closer, and just consider it and become okay with it. And if that takes a few weeks or a few months, that's okay. And in that time, if you want to do what this brave young man did and go sit in a gay club and talk to a bunch of people and see how it feels, do it. Nothing wrong with it. Just don't jump in with both feet on this one. Generally speaking, first experiences when it comes to sexuality are not good experiences. Generally, the first one we jump in with someone who doesn't know anything and we don't know anything, and it's messy. There are very few of you who've probably been lucky enough to have an amazing first sexual experience, but for most people it's not true. So, just handle this one gently. Work with it gently. Let the idea grow and let yourself grow comfortable with it. And see where it leads you. And probably more than anything else, except perhaps just feeling and getting used to the feeling, more than anything else, talk about it. You guys are a community. You're not single individuals. You come across something you find scary, talk to somebody about it. Probably others find it scary too. You run across something really cool, talk about it. You go out and do something like Gimli just did when he spoke a few minutes ago. Share it with people. See how much fun it was. I'll tell you from experience, I've been to lots of straight clubs, dance clubs, and I hate them. All this social pressure and everybody trying to push each other out of the way and rah, rah, rah. And I have almost never been to a gay club I didn't enjoy. The people are just more friendly, and you go out and dance and have fun and you leave and there's no sweat. Nobody, in the time I've been in gay clubs, nobody has ever tried to intimidate me or shove me out of the way because I was getting too close to their partner. I've never seen that. That in general, this is a very safe thing to explore. Go out and play a little bit. Enjoy it. Experience it. Begin to tame it. And communicate. And with that said, good night. You want to close?
Yes.
All right. It's all yours.
I'm going to do it. Because this whole sex thing is a carrier wave for who we truly are inside, to express that, let's talk a little bit about the successes I've had with integrity recently. 2 minutes. Yes. Because the same day as that I went to the gay club, in the afternoon I was walking in the park, and some kid said, "Hey, mister!" And I was like, "What's up?" And the kid was like, So I walked up to the kids and said, "Okay, hey, what's up?" And before I knew it, 20 kids were standing around me. "Hey, I've seen you running around before, and you were singing this and that." And because I've been around the neighborhood doing my swagger thing lately, apparently the kids noticed. So I talked to them a bit about, well, this is what I do. This is what makes me happy. And the kids were, "Oh, that's so interesting, do you?" And they were asking all kinds of questions, so I basically wove a bit of integrity, teaching them about integrity into my storytelling. Like, "Oh, so, mister, are you a hippie?" "No, but you can be if you want to be." "Oh, cool, but I don't like this about hippies." "Well, then you don't have to do that." "Cool." He was like, "Huh, that makes sense." So, in this manner, I have had a lot of success with just being me, and people are actually liking that. And of course, you may not have 20 or 30 people around you listening to what you say, because that might not be what you like. So, basically just, I would like to close with, go be you, and show us pictures.